The Houston Rockets are becoming dangerous. After having somewhat of a shaky start to the season, as of late, the Rockets are doing a really nice job at figuring things out, as they're currently on a 4-game winning streak and the record on the season is 12-9. And when you watch them out on the court, their guys are not only playing better individually now than they were earlier on into the season, but they're also playing much better as a team. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Houston Rockets have been in the rebuild process ever since trading away James Harden. And originally when the Rockets were first starting to draft their own guys and first starting to enter into the rebuild process, they were doing a pretty nice job at drafting nice players. Like for example, they were able to bring in Jalen Green and some other guys, and when you looked at the team that the Rockets had over the past couple years, it was pretty clear there was actually a good amount of young talent on the roster, but the main concern and the main issue with them is they had no real structure. When you looked at the Rockets last year and a couple years prior to that, they had Jalen Green, who was doing his thing, putting up great individual numbers. They also had Kevin Porter Jr., who was doing the same, but when you look outside of those two guys, it was pretty clear that the Rockets had no real structure and they were more so of a collegiate team than an NBA team. And when you have an NBA team that has that sort of issue, the main blame has to go to the head coach. The main job of a head coach is to have all his players buy in, have all his players play for him, and make sure his team is playing team and winning basketball. And when you looked at the Houston Rockets, it was pretty clear that both Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. were basically only playing out there for their own individual statistics. And at that point, it's pretty clear that their head coach completely lost the locker room, and it was definitely time to move on and find a different head coach. Now, obviously, besides the coach, both Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green were also to blame as well. Although they are young and inexperienced players, at the end of the day, they should still know that they should move the ball a little bit more, have a little bit of better shot selection out there as well, and overall there definitely was a lot of things that both of those guys could have done to be better out there. But regardless of those facts, going into this season, Houston's front office realized that they needed to make some changes in order to steer themselves in the right direction. As going into the season, the first thing that the Rockets changed was their head coach, as they ended up bringing in Ime Udoka. And Ime Udoka is a guy who had a lot of success with the Boston Celtics. He was a guy that not only was able to make it to the playoffs, but also has a lot of playoff experience being a head coach. So bringing in a veteran presence like that to your organization that was definitely dealing with some issues, like maturity issues and also some other issues on the court, it was definitely something that was seen as a very positive move for the Rockets. But also besides the head coaching change, the Rockets decided to bring in a couple of guys during free agency, and the player they brought in that was most notable was definitely Fred VanVleet. As VanVleet was a guy who won an NBA championship in the past with the Toronto Raptors, so he has championship experience and he knows what it takes to win a championship and can teach some of these younger guys to do what it takes in order to improve their team overall. But even besides that aspect, Fred VanVleet is obviously already the best player on this Rockets team. He's a guy that has the capability of putting up 25 plus points on any given night, but even besides that, he does a great job at facilitating for his teammates, getting his guys open looks, and overall just making everybody out there a little bit better. So going into the season, I definitely was a pretty big fan of the couple of different moves that the Rockets did make, and at this point, I think we're finally starting to see the Rockets have a lot more success. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is what changed from earlier on into the season until this point, where at this point, the Rockets are clearly playing significantly better basketball than they were earlier on. Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the main factor has to be the comfort level between these guys. Because obviously when you're bringing in a new head coach and you're bringing in new significant players like Fred VanVleet and some others, of course there's going to be somewhat of an adjustment period. And actually, I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but that adjustment period can vary depending on the team. Sometimes that adjustment period ends up being a full season, maybe it's a little bit more than that, maybe it's a little bit less than that, but regardless of how long it takes, there usually is somewhat of an adjustment adjustment period. And I think at this point for the Rockets, their adjustment period wasn't nearly as long as it would have been for other organizations. Because at this point, the Rockets are on a 4-game winning streak and they're just playing a lot better than they were before. And they're doing a much better job at running Ime Udoka's offense a lot more efficiently. They're doing a much better job at facilitating the ball around, getting guys open looks, and even defensively, the Rockets are also doing a much better job. And I think all of that has to come down to their chemistry improving and just their camaraderie getting a lot better than it was earlier on in the season. Because as these players get more and more comfortable with their teammates and they know where their guys are going to be out there in the court, it just makes everything that much easier. Because if you know where your guys are going to be out there in the court, it makes it much easier to find your guys for wide open looks, as opposed to playing with guys that you're not all that comfortable with. So I definitely think the improvement in chemistry and overall camaraderie is a huge reason for why we're seeing this improvement from the Houston Rockets. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, what are my expectations for this Houston Rockets team throughout the rest of the season? Well, I definitely am a huge fan of what the Rockets are doing. They're doing a really nice job at developing a lot of their younger guys, but also at the same time playing winning basketball. And although the Rockets are still somewhat early on into the rebuild process, I think based upon the addition of Ime Udoka and based upon the addition of Fred VanVleet, I would actually expect this team to at the bare minimum make the play-in tournament. And to be completely honest, I don't necessarily think expecting the Rockets to be a top 8 seed in the Western Conference is all that unrealistic. Although it is extremely early on into the season, they have proven an ability to play really well and hang with some pretty good teams out there. And if they're able to do that, and if they're basically able to stay around 500, they will probably be a top 8 seed in the Western Conference. Now, going into the playoffs, if the Rockets do end up making it there, I am not expecting all that much from them. They're probably going to lose in the first round, but regardless of that fact, if they're able to win one game, a couple games, or even no games, at the end of the day, it is something that's extremely important for these young guys. Because obviously when you talk about younger players and younger talented players, they're probably not going to win a championship in their first playoff series. But the important thing about the first time these guys make it to the playoffs is it serves as a real learning experience for these guys. Because then the seasons following that, then a lot of these younger guys know what to expect in the playoffs, know what they need to do, and know what they need to change in order to be more successful. And going forward from here, you would only expect this team to improve year after year. So overall, I definitely do like a lot of what I'm seeing from the Houston Rockets. I do think they should be able to make the playoffs, or at the bare minimum, the play-in tournament this season. And going forward from here, I do think the Rockets have turned the ship in the right direction. So in the long-term future, I fully expect them to only get better with time. Season after season, just make slight improvements until eventually they get to the point where they're a championship contender. But of course, I will say, in order for the Rockets to become championship contenders, it's not something that's going to happen all that soon. They're of course going to need to make the playoffs first, then they're going to need a couple seasons to make slight improvements, and then eventually, in maybe 4 or 5 years from now, they can be legitimate championship contenders. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for the Houston Rockets. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Rockets are finally starting to figure things out, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.